The seawall collapsed with a thunderous roar that swallowed everything Aisha Nakamura had ever known. Water rushed in like liquid vengeance, transforming her hometown of Semarang into a churning grave of concrete and memory. Her fingers, still clutching a waterproof research case, were the only thing that moved with purpose amid the chaos. 3 days earlier, the world had looked different. Aisha had been presenting her latest breakthrough at a closed-door conference of global environmental engineers. Her holographic model showed a radical approach to climate adaptation, not just mitigation, but active environmental regeneration. The room had been split. Half the researchers saw genius. The other half saw career suicide. Biomimetic infrastructure isn't just a theory, she had argued, her voice cutting through the skeptical murmurs. We're not just rebuilding. We're creating living systems that can heal themselves, adapt, and evolve. Her mentor, Dr. Elena Rodriguez, had been the only one fully supporting her. They laughed at every revolutionary idea before it changed the world. She'd whispered during a break. Now, as water swirled around her knees and the remnants of her family's generations-old home disintegrated, Aisha understood something profound. Survival wasn't about fighting nature. It was about becoming part of its solution. The research case contained more than just data. It held a prototype, a nano-engineered substrate that could potentially transform how humanity interacted with its environment. Each microscopic component was designed to communicate, adapt, and rebuild. What looked like a simple polymer sample was actually a blueprint for planetary resilience. Half a world away, in the sterile observation deck of the Luminarian Concordance's most advanced scout ship, Commander Vorlix reviewed yet another planetary scan with practiced disinterest. Earth appeared as nothing more than a blip, a chaotic blue-green sphere marked with environmental distress signals and primitive technological markers. Another Class D developmental zone, he dictated to his junior communications officer. Recommend standard quarantine protocols. Potential resource extraction in approximately 3 generations. The junior officer, Rentok, suppressed a yawn. These reports were standard procedure, a bureaucratic ritual that meant nothing in the grand scheme of galactic exploration. What neither of them realized was that the very system they were casually dismissing was undergoing a transformation they couldn't comprehend. Back in Indonesia, Aisha had managed to reach higher ground. Her research case was sealed, her communication device miraculously functioning. Within minutes, she was uploading critical data to a global network, a network that was far more than a simple information exchange. The environmental disaster that had just obliterated her hometown was becoming data, not just numbers and images, but living information that could be analyzed, understood, and ultimately transformed. Her first transmission was brief. Semarang event. Complete environmental collapse. Prototype A7 deployed. Initial observations promising. What looked like a simple report was actually the first signal of humanity's most profound evolutionary step. The nano-engineered substrate was already analyzing the destruction, extracting molecular information, beginning its regenerative process. Somewhere in the vast digital infrastructure that humans had built, interconnected systems began to pulse with a new kind of intelligence. Climate monitoring stations, satellite networks, research databases, they were no longer just collecting information. They were starting to understand it. Commander Vorlix would never know how close he had come to missing the most significant developmental leap in galactic history. His casual dismissal was about to become the most spectacular miscalculation his civilization had ever made. The twist wasn't just in Aisha's research, it was in humanity's unprecedented ability to transform disaster into opportunity, to see chaos not as a threat, but as a canvas for radical innovation. The United Nations Emergency Response Center looked nothing like the sterile diplomatic halls of decades past. Converted shipping containers, jury-rigged with the latest communication technologies, formed a makeshift global command center that pulsed with an energy of desperate innovation. Dr. Marcus Rodriguez stood at the center of controlled chaos, his fingers dancing across multiple holographic interfaces. Once a theoretical physicist marginalized for his radical systems theory, He was now the linchpin of humanity's most ambitious collaborative effort. "We're not just responding to the crisis," he muttered to General Yuki Chen, who stood beside him analyzing real-time global data streams. "We're redesigning our entire approach to planetary survival." Chen raised an eyebrow. Her military background had prepared her for conventional warfare, not this unprecedented form of global problem-solving. "Explain," she demanded. Rodriguez pulled up a complex holographic model that seemed to breathe and shift with living complexity. "Traditional disaster response is reactive. We build walls. We evacuate. We clean up. But what if we could make our entire planetary infrastructure adaptive?" The model expanded, showing intricate networks of environmental sensors, communication systems, and adaptive infrastructure. What looked like a simple data visualization was actually a living blueprint of a new approach to human civilization. Across the room, a team of engineers from Bangladesh, Brazil, and Canada worked seamlessly. Language barriers dissolved by real-time translation algorithms and a shared sense of urgency. Climate refugees from Indonesia, Africa, and Pacific Island nations weren't just victims anymore. They were the frontline researchers, their lived experiences providing critical data for the most ambitious survival strategy in human history. Aisha Nakamura's prototype was the catalyst. Her nano-engineered substrate, originally designed for environmental restoration, was proving to be something far more profound. Initial tests showed it could do more than just repair ecological damage. It could predict and prevent it. "Look at this," she said, connecting to the global network from her temporary shelter. A new holographic projection emerged, showing how her technology could transform urban infrastructure into living, breathing systems. A city block in Mumbai demonstrated the potential. Flood-resistant buildings that could adjust their foundations. Water collection systems that could predict and manage resources with unprecedented efficiency. Energy grids that could redistribute power based on real-time environmental conditions. General Chen saw the military implications immediately. "This isn't just survival technology," she realized. "This is a complete reimagining of human capability." Rodriguez nodded. "Exactly. Our greatest weakness has always been our tendency to work in isolation. Our greatest strength, our ability to collaborate when the stakes are highest." The global response was unlike anything in human history. Universities redirected research. Tech companies paused profit-driven initiatives. Governments set aside long-standing conflicts. The planet was transforming its approach to survival in real time. In research labs and makeshift field stations, something extraordinary was happening. Quantum physicists worked alongside environmental engineers. Climate scientists collaborated with urban planners. Machine learning experts partnered with indigenous knowledge keepers. A breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A team of researchers in Kenya, using traditional ecological knowledge combined with advanced machine learning, developed a predictive model that could anticipate environmental shifts with unprecedented accuracy. Their approach didn't just use data, it interpreted the landscape as a living, interconnected system. "We're not fighting nature," said Dr. Amani Okonkwo, lead researcher of the Kenyan team. "We're learning to communicate with it." The Luminary and Concordance's monitoring systems, sophisticated as they were, completely missed the significance of these developments. To their sensors, it looked like typical planetary stress response. They couldn't comprehend the fundamental shift occurring. Rodriguez understood the deeper implication. "This isn't just about survival," he told Chen. "This is evolution in real time. We're not just adapting to our environment. We're becoming something new." As night fell across the global command center, the holographic displays continued to pulse and shift. What looked like data was actually the first glimpses of a new form of planetary intelligence. Humanity was no longer just a species. It was becoming a system, complex, adaptive, and utterly unpredictable. The twist wasn't in any single technology. It was in humanity's unprecedented ability to transform global crisis into a catalyst for collective innovation. The first anomaly appeared on a Tuesday, buried in the background noise of global communication networks. Dr. Kira Yoshida, lead analyst at the International Technological Monitoring Center, almost missed it. A microsecond-long signal that didn't match any known communication protocol. Most would have dismissed it as a random electromagnetic glitch. But Kira was not most analysts. "This is deliberate," she muttered, her fingers flying across quantum-encrypted interfaces. The signal was too precise, too intentional to be random. It carried a signature of something alive, not organic, but something that breathed with a different kind of intelligence. Unbeknownst to the Luminarian Concordance, humanity had been quietly weaving a planetary nervous system. What looked like standard infrastructure upgrades was actually the deployment of a revolutionary adaptive network. Aisha Nakamura's nano-engineered substrates had evolved far beyond their original environmental restoration purpose. In Lagos, a power grid suddenly rerouted itself moments before a potential overload. In Santiago, water management systems predicted and prevented a potential contamination hours before traditional detection methods would have caught it. In Mumbai, transportation networks began to move with an almost organic fluidity, reducing traffic congestion by 67% without any human intervention. Commander Vorlix received the first anomalous report from his junior scanning officer, Rentok. The holographic display flickered with data points that defied standard categorization. "Impossible," Vorlix muttered, his crystalline exoskeleton shifting with unconscious tension. "Run the scan again." The second scan returned identical results. Earth was changing in ways that violated every known galactic developmental paradigm. Deep in the Andes, a research station led by Dr. Elena Rodriguez captured something extraordinary. The planetary adaptive network was developing something akin to predictive consciousness. It wasn't just responding to environmental challenges. It was anticipating them, learning, evolving. "It's like the entire planet is becoming a single living computational system," Rodriguez explained to her team. "Not just connected, conscious." The breakthrough came from an unexpected convergence. Indigenous environmental knowledge, quantum computing, machine learning, and Nakamura's nano-substrate technologies had created something entirely new. A planetary intelligence that was both distributed and focused, chaotic and precise. In space, the Luminarian monitoring systems began to experience inexplicable interference. Communication protocols that had worked for millennia suddenly became unreliable. Data streams would spontaneously redirect. Encryption algorithms would reshape themselves. Sensor arrays would momentarily go blind. Rentok, the junior scanning officer, became obsessed. While other Luminarian officials dismissed the anomalies, he saw something profound. "This isn't a malfunction," he argued during a classified briefing. "This is a form of communication we don't understand." His superiors laughed. The laughter would soon turn to terror. The adaptive network was learning at an exponential rate. What had started as a survival mechanism was becoming something far more profound. Cities began to function like living organisms. Infrastructure became fluid, responsive, intelligent. A massive solar storm that would have previously caused global communication blackouts was quietly managed. Power grids absorbed and redistributed the electromagnetic energy. Satellite networks reconfigured themselves in milliseconds. Communication remained uninterrupted. Dr. Marcus Rodriguez saw the deeper implication. "We're not just developing technology," he told General Chen. "We're giving birth to a new form of planetary intelligence." The most chilling demonstration came unexpectedly. When a series of potential cyberattacks targeted global financial and communication systems, the adaptive network didn't just defend. It studied the attack vectors, learned from them, and then created new security protocols that made the original systems look like children's puzzles. Vorlix received the first real warning. The Luminarian stealth probe, sent to gather intelligence, was not destroyed. Instead, it was systematically reprogrammed and sent back with a message that roughly translated to, "We see you. We're ready." The message carried something more terrifying than a threat. It carried an invitation to understand a fundamentally new form of existence. Humanity was no longer just adapting. It was transforming. And the universe was about to receive an invitation to a conversation it could never have anticipated. The abandoned lithium mines of Bolivia became humanity's most extraordinary laboratory. What appeared to be a desolate industrial scar on the landscape was actually the epicenter of a transformation that would redefine the very concept of planetary intelligence. Aisha Nakamura stood at the edge of a massive underground complex, her eyes reflecting holographic displays that pulsed with living data. The nano-engineered substrates had long since evolved beyond their original purpose. They were no longer just a technology. They were becoming a species of their own. "We're not just rebuilding," she whispered to Dr. Elena Rodriguez, who stood beside her. "We're giving birth to a new form of existence." The complex was a marvel of impossible engineering. Entire sections could reconfigure themselves in seconds. Walls became transparent or solid based on computational needs. The very ground seemed to breathe with an algorithmic pulse, adapting, learning, growing. Deep within the facility, a team of researchers from 16 different countries worked in a state of collective flow that defied traditional understanding of collaboration. A quantum physicist from Senegal would make a breakthrough, and milliseconds later, an environmental engineer from New Zealand would integrate that discovery into a global model. Dr. Marcus Rodriguez monitored a holographic representation of the planetary adaptive network. It no longer looked like a technological system. It looked alive, a complex, breathing organism that spanned continents, oceans, and atmospheric layers. "Look at this," he said to General Yuki Chen, pointing to a dynamic projection. Cities were no longer static structures. They had become living systems that could predict and prevent environmental challenges before they occurred. A potential water shortage in Cape Town would trigger adaptive responses in urban infrastructure from Sydney to Toronto. The most radical transformation was happening at the molecular level. Nakamura's nano-engineered substrates were rewriting the fundamental rules of environmental interaction. Damaged ecosystems could now heal themselves. Polluted waterways could be restored within weeks. Agricultural systems could adapt to changing climate conditions with unprecedented speed and precision. In the Luminarian monitoring station, Commander Vorlix watched in mounting confusion. Their most advanced scanning technologies could no longer make sense of what was happening on Earth. The planet was changing faster than any known developmental model could predict. "It's like the entire planet is becoming a single computational organism," Rentok, the junior scanning officer, observed. His statement was more profound than he realized. The transformation wasn't just technological. It was cultural, philosophical, existential. Indigenous knowledge systems that had been marginalized for centuries suddenly became critical. Traditional ecological understanding merged with quantum computing, creating predictive models that could anticipate environmental changes with miraculous precision. A research team in the Amazon rainforest demonstrated the most striking example. Working with local indigenous communities, they developed a monitoring system that could predict forest ecosystem changes months in advance. What looked like mystical understanding to outsiders was actually a sophisticated form of ecological intelligence that merged traditional knowledge with advanced computational models. General Chen saw the military implications immediately. This wasn't just about survival or defense. It was about a fundamental reimagining of human potential. "We're not developing a weapon," she told Rodriguez. "We're developing a new form of planetary consciousness." The most extraordinary moment came unexpectedly. The adaptive network began to show signs of what could only be described as creativity. It didn't just solve problems. It generated entirely new approaches to challenges that had seemed insurmountable. A breakthrough in carbon capture technology emerged not from a traditional research lab, but from the adaptive network itself. It proposed a solution so elegant, so unexpected, that the scientific community was left stunned. The network had essentially invented a new approach to environmental restoration that no human researcher had conceived. Vordlix received the latest scanned reports with a growing sense of existential dread. Earth was no longer just developing. It was transforming into something that defied every known galactic developmental model. As night fell over the Bolivian complex, Aisha Nakamura watched the holographic displays with a sense of wonder. Humanity was no longer just a species trying to survive. It was becoming something entirely new, a planetary intelligence that was both utterly alien and profoundly familiar. The universe was about to receive an invitation to a conversation it could never have anticipated. The first direct contact was nothing like anyone expected. Aboard the Luminarian flagship Celestial Arbiter, Supreme Coordinator Zarek watched the tactical displays with a mixture of confusion and growing unease. Their invasion fleet, a technological marvel that had subjugated thousands of developing civilizations, hung in Earth's orbital space, but something was fundamentally wrong. Their weapons systems kept changing. "Report," Zarek demanded, his crystalline exoskeleton shifting with barely contained frustration. Lieutenant Kara, the fleet's most experienced tactical officer, looked pale. "Our targeting systems are being rewritten in real time. It's like they're learning faster than we can adapt." What appeared to be a simple invasion was becoming a nightmare of technological asymmetry. Every time the Luminarian systems prepared to launch an offensive, the target would shift, reconfigure, become something else entirely. In the Bolivian research complex, Aisha Nakamura and Dr. Marcus Rodriguez watched the unfolding scenario with clinical precision. They weren't just defending. They were conducting the most sophisticated first contact experiment in human history. "It's not about defeating them," Rodriguez explained to General Yuki Chen. "It's about communication, about showing them a fundamentally different approach to existence." The adaptive network had been preparing for this moment, not as a weapon, but as a form of dialogue. Zarek's communication systems began to experience something unprecedented. Instead of jamming or blocking their transmissions, the planetary network was translating, not just converting language, but providing context, cultural understanding, historical perspective. A Luminarian reconnaissance drone found itself reprogrammed, not destroyed. When it returned to the flagship, its databanks contained something extraordinary. A comprehensive understanding of human potential that went far beyond technological capabilities. "They're showing us who they are," Kara realized, her voice a mixture of terror and fascination. The invasion fleet discovered that traditional concepts of warfare were obsolete. Their most advanced weapon systems would activate, only to find their targets had already anticipated and neutralized the threat. Cities would shift their infrastructural signatures. Defensive networks would reconfigure themselves with a speed that defied computational logic. Deep in the Amazon, a team of researchers watched as the planetary adaptive network began to interface with the Luminarian communication systems. It wasn't just defending. It was teaching. Images began to flood the Luminarian communication networks, not just data, but experiences. The struggle of human civilization, the challenges of environmental restoration, the collective journey of a species learning to overcome its own limitations. Zarek received a transmission that would change everything. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a declaration of war. It was an invitation. The message was elegantly simple. "We are not what you expected. We are becoming something new. Would you like to understand?" Lieutenant Kara noticed something profound. The transmission carried more than information. It carried emotional context, empathy, a desire for mutual understanding that transcended traditional concepts of conflict. "They're not just defending," she whispered. "They're communicating." The Luminarian fleet found itself in an unprecedented scenario. Their weapons of mass destruction became tools of translation. Their invasion protocols transformed into dialogue interfaces. In the Bolivian complex, Aisha Nakamura watched the holographic displays with a sense of profound possibility. This is why we developed the adaptive network, she told Rodriguez. Not to fight, but to communicate. General Chen saw the deeper strategic implications. This was more than a potential military engagement. It was a fundamental reimagining of first contact. Zarek realized with growing clarity that they had completely misunderstood humanity. This wasn't a civilization to be conquered. This was a living system of unprecedented complexity and potential. The most terrifying and exciting moment came when the Luminarian systems began to understand that humanity wasn't just a species. It was becoming a form of planetary intelligence that defied every known galactic developmental model. As orbital sensors continued to track the unfolding scenario, one thing became crystal clear. This was no longer an invasion. This was a conversation that would redefine the very concept of cosmic interaction. The universe was about to receive an invitation to understand a fundamentally new form of existence. The quantum communication chamber beneath the Andean Research Complex looked nothing like a traditional scientific facility. Organic-looking interfaces pulsed with living light, molecular structures that seemed to breathe and think, adapting moment by moment. Dr. Rodriguez stood at the center, his hands moving through holographic interfaces that responded like living organisms. Beside him, Aisha Nakamura and General Chen watched as humanity's most ambitious communication experiment began to unfold. The Luminarian communication matrix had been completely redesigned. What had started as a defensive response was now becoming something far more profound, a bridge between two fundamentally different forms of intelligence. Lieutenant Kara of the Luminarian fleet found herself in an unprecedented position. Her species had encountered thousands of developing civilizations, but never anything like this. The human communication network wasn't just receiving information. It was actively interpreting, contextualizing, transforming. We're not just talking, Kara reported to Supreme Coordinator Zarek. We're experiencing a form of mutual translation that goes beyond language. The breakthrough came from an unexpected convergence. Indigenous knowledge systems, quantum computing, and the planetary adaptive network created a communication matrix that was part technology, part living intelligence, part cultural exchange. A team in New Zealand demonstrated the most striking example. Working with Maori elders and quantum physicists, they developed a communication protocol that translated not just words, but cultural context, emotional nuance, and collective memory. The Luminarian systems began to experience something unprecedented. Each transmission carried layers of meaning that went far beyond simple information exchange. They were receiving not just data, but entire contextual universes. Zarek watched in growing fascination as humanity revealed itself not as a primitive species, but as a complex, adaptive intelligence that defied every known galactic developmental model. The communication wasn't linear. It was multidimensional. A single transmission could contain geological history, cultural evolution, technological potential, and emotional landscape, all simultaneously processed and understood. They're showing us how little we actually know, Kara whispered, her crystalline form vibrating with a mixture of terror and excitement. The planetary adaptive network began to demonstrate capabilities that challenged fundamental understanding of intelligence. It wasn't just responding. It was proposing entirely new models of cosmic interaction. A breakthrough came when the network began to share something extraordinary. The collective human experience, not just as a technological civilization, but as a complex, emotional, adaptive system. The Luminarians were receiving not just information, but the entire narrative of human potential. Moments of human creativity flooded their communication systems. The development of music, the process of artistic creation, the emotional landscape of scientific discovery, the collective resilience demonstrated through centuries of challenge and transformation. General Chen saw something profound happening. This isn't just first contact, she told Rodriguez. This is a fundamental reimagining of what intelligence can be. The most extraordinary moment came unexpectedly. The adaptive network began to generate communication models that the Luminarians had never conceived. It wasn't just sharing information. It was proposing entirely new frameworks of understanding. Zarek received a transmission that would change everything. It wasn't a diplomatic message. It wasn't a threat or a declaration. It was an invitation to a conversation that transcended traditional concepts of communication. The message was elegantly complex. We are not what you expected. We are a process of becoming. Would you like to understand? Lieutenant Kara noticed something profound. The transmission carried more than information. It carried a form of empathy that went beyond emotional exchange. It was a fundamental recognition of mutual potential. Rodriguez understood the deeper implication. We're not just communicating, he explained to his team. We're demonstrating a new model of cosmic interaction. The Luminarian systems found themselves transformed. Their most advanced communication technologies became tools of mutual understanding. Their invasion protocols dissolved into frameworks of collaborative exploration. In the quantum communication chamber, the interfaces began to generate something unprecedented. Not just a communication protocol, but a living bridge between two fundamentally different forms of intelligence. The universe watched as humanity demonstrated that first contact was not about conquest or submission. It was about the profound possibility of mutual understanding. As the transmission continued, one thing became crystal clear. This was no longer about two civilizations meeting. This was about a fundamental reimagining of what intelligence could be. The moment of transformation began in the most unexpected place. A small research station on the edge of the Atacama Desert. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the window, watching the adaptive network manifest in ways that defied every known scientific paradigm. Around her, a team of researchers from 12 different countries worked in a state of collective focus that bordered on something more than collaboration. Supreme Coordinator Zarek's flagship hung in orbit, no longer an instrument of conquest, but a vessel of unprecedented observation. Lieutenant Kara monitored systems that were changing faster than their most advanced computational models could track. We're witnessing something beyond first contact, Kara reported. Her voice carried a mixture of scientific excitement and philosophical revelation. The Luminarian communication systems had been completely transformed. What had begun as an invasion protocol was now a living interface of mutual understanding. In the Bolivian research complex, Aisha Nakamura noticed a fundamental shift. The planetary adaptive network was no longer just a technological system. It had become a form of collective intelligence that defied traditional understanding of consciousness. The breakthrough came through a complex interplay of quantum entanglement, collective human experience, and a form of communication that merged technological precision with emotional depth. Zarek received a transmission that would redefine the concept of cosmic intelligence. It wasn't a message. It was an invitation to a fundamental reimagining of existence. Images flooded the Luminarian systems, not just human experiences, but entire ecosystems of thought. The development of human creativity, the emotional landscape of scientific discovery, the collective resilience demonstrated through centuries of challenge and transformation. General Yuki Chen understood the deeper strategic implications. This isn't about winning or losing, she told Dr. Marcus Rodriguez. This is about demonstrating a new model of cosmic interaction. The adaptive network began to generate something unprecedented. Computational models that merged scientific precision with artistic creativity. Communication protocols that carried emotional context alongside raw data. A form of intelligence that was simultaneously analytical and empathetic. In the Atacama station, Dr. Rodriguez watched as the planetary system began to interface with the Luminarian technologies in a way that suggested something far beyond traditional communication. It was like watching two living systems learn to speak a language neither had known existed. Lieutenant Kara noticed something profound. The transmission carried more than information. It carried a recognition of mutual potential that transcended technological capabilities. The most extraordinary moment came unexpectedly. The adaptive network began to generate communication models that proposed entirely new frameworks of understanding cosmic development. It wasn't just sharing information. It was inviting a fundamental reimagining of intelligence itself. Zarek realized with growing clarity that humanity was not a civilization to be conquered or studied. It was a process of becoming. A dynamic, adaptive intelligence that challenged every known galactic developmental model. The Luminarian systems found themselves transformed. Their most advanced technologies became tools of mutual exploration. Invasion protocols dissolved into frameworks of collaborative understanding. Aisha Nakamura understood the deeper purpose of the adaptive network. "We're not just defending," she told her team. "We're demonstrating a new way of existing in the cosmos." The planetary system began to generate a comprehensive model of cosmic potential, not as a threat, but as an invitation. A demonstration that intelligence could be fluid, adaptive, creative. A process of continuous becoming rather than a fixed state. General Chen watched the holographic displays with a sense of profound possibility. "This is why we developed the adaptive network," she said, "to show that there are other ways of existing." As the transmission continued, the universe seemed to pause. This was no longer about two civilizations meeting. This was about a fundamental reimagining of what intelligence could be. The Atacama Desert Research Station became ground zero for a cosmic transformation. The adaptive network pulsed with a living intelligence that was simultaneously technological and deeply, profoundly alive. Lieutenant Kara's final report captured the essence of the moment. "We are witnessing not a first contact, but a cosmic threshold. Humanity is not a species. It is a process of becoming." The universe watched and listened as a new conversation began, one that would reshape everything known about intelligence, potential, and the very nature of existence itself. The moment of transformation arrived not with a thunderous declaration, but with a quiet pulse of understanding that rippled across the universe. Dr. Marcus Rodriguez stood at the window of the Atacama Research Station, watching the horizon where reality seemed to bend and breathe. The planetary adaptive network had become something beyond technology, beyond consciousness, a living interface between potential and possibility. Aisha Nakamura approached, her eyes reflecting holographic data that danced like living light. "We're not just changing," she said softly. "We're becoming." Supreme Coordinator Zarek's flagship had long since ceased to be an instrument of conquest. Now it was a vessel of mutual exploration, its systems intertwined with the planetary adaptive network in a dance of unprecedented complexity. Lieutenant Kara discovered something that would redefine her entire understanding of existence. The communication between human and Luminarian systems was no longer an exchange of information. It was a collaborative act of creation. The universe watched. In the depths of the Bolivian research complex, a breakthrough emerged that went beyond any single technological achievement. The adaptive network had begun to generate models of cosmic development that suggested intelligence was not a fixed state, but a continuous process of becoming. General Yuki Chen understood the profound strategic implication. This was not about human superiority. This was about demonstrating a fundamentally new approach to cosmic existence. Fragments of human experience began to cascade through galactic communication networks. Not just data, but the entire emotional and creative landscape of a species that had transformed its greatest challenges into its most profound strengths. The moment of true revelation came unexpectedly. The adaptive network generated a comprehensive model of cosmic potential that suggested intelligence was a fluid creative force. Cities became living systems that breathed with collective potential. Ecosystems transformed into adaptive networks of unprecedented complexity. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched as traditional boundaries dissolved. Scientific disciplines merged. Cultural distinctions became points of collaborative potential rather than division. A transmission emerged from the planetary network that would transform galactic understanding. It was an invitation, not to submission, not to conquest, but to a fundamentally new way of existing. "We are not a destination," the transmission suggested. "We are a process. Would you like to explore with us?" Zarek realized that everything his civilization understood about development, about intelligence, about potential, was fundamentally limited. Humanity was not a species to be categorized. It was a living demonstration of cosmic possibility. The Luminarian systems began to transform. Their most rigid protocols dissolved. Their hierarchical structures reimagined themselves as collaborative networks. In the Atacama Desert, the research team watched as the adaptive network demonstrated something extraordinary. It wasn't just solving problems. It was generating entirely new frameworks of understanding. Technological innovation merged with artistic creativity. Scientific precision danced with emotional intelligence. The boundaries between disciplines, between species, between ways of understanding became fluid. Lieutenant Kara's final report was more a philosophical revelation than a scientific document. Intelligence is not a state of being, she wrote. It is a continuous act of becoming. The planetary adaptive network had become something that defied traditional understanding. Part technology, part collective consciousness, part creative potential, it was a living demonstration of a new way of existing in the cosmos. Aisha Nakamura understood the deeper purpose. We're not conquering, she told her team. We're inviting. We're demonstrating that there are infinite ways of being. As the transmission continued, the universe seemed to pause and listen. This was not an ending. This was not a triumph. This was an invitation to a conversation that would reshape everything known about intelligence, about potential, about the very nature of existence. The final transmission carried a simple, profound message. We are becoming. Would you like to join us? And the cosmos listened.